Friday the 13th Part 2 was released in 1981, a year after the first one hit the screens. The idea by Paramount would be to release a movie every year and basically have teenagers flock to the theater to see the latest entry of this series. Sean Cunningham did not return as lead director on this one. Instead, the director's chair was passed to Steve Miner. This was his first film as director, previously working mainly as a production assistant or an editor's assistant. Likely he ended up getting this gig based on his relationship he established with Cunningham on The Last House on the Left, and as the assistant director on the first Friday the 13th. The movie opens with our star from the first movie, Alice, still recovering after the death of her friends, and her own near death, but she's quickly killed by Jason. This is meant to play as a surprise to the audience, as she is almost set up to be the protagonist once again. Her role is comparable to Annie's in the first, where she is made to seem important but is killed off very fast to show that this new killer takes no prisoners. However, this is even more effective as her death shows not even a previous survivor is safe and really ups the stakes on this new killer. The rest of the plot is fairly similar to the first, taking place 5 years after the events of the first film. A group of camp counselors are working to set up a new camp led by Paul Holt on the near-deserted Camp Crystal Lake. The campers are Ginny, the new group survivor who is the only camper that takes the legend of Jason seriously, and cannon fodder Vicky, Terry, Sandra, Jeff, and Scott. On top of them, we also have our new gimmick characters, Mark, who's handicapped but is still pretty much standard cannon fodder, and Ted, the strange prankster who manages to survive because he decided to stay at some random backwoods casino bar. Anyhow, predictably, the camp counselors are all picked off and murdered one by one until they are all dead except for Paul and our protagonist Ginny. They ultimately encounter and fight the killer. Sadly, Ginny is the worst fighter ever, with moments like her chasing the killer with a chainsaw only to put the chainsaw down, opting to hit him with a very weak chair instead. Anyway, at the end of the film we learn Ginny's fears were correct and that Jason came to kill these counselors in order to get revenge for the death of his mother. Ginny thinks she defeats Jason by convincing him that she is Pamela by tossing on his mother's sweater and pretending to be her to get the jump on him and hack him with a machete. After this, Ginny and Paul head back to the cabin, only for the horrible, deformed, hairy Jason to pull her through the window, after which she wakes up the next morning on a stretcher calling Paul's name with no response. Ultimately, Paul may or may not have been fatally injured, because the newscaster said they found 8 bodies when 2 of the bodies were in Jason's shack. So either the newscaster learned of these corpses and the police left them there with Paul surviving, or the police were bad counters and counted the 7 corpses as 8. Regardless, his fate is left ambiguous. In many ways this film is better than the first, but in many other ways it's inferior. In the way of kills, it's one hell of an improvement. This was probably helped pretty immensely by the budget, which was more than double the first, landing at $1.25 million. It probably has one of the best deaths in the entire series with Mark's epic staircase death. And with the kills being one of the main attractions of these films, if that's what you're coming in looking for, it is certainly better. However, where this movie falls short is the characters. For one, our protagonist Ginny. In the first film, Alice is strong, smart, and for the most part faces up to her fear without the help of others when facing Pamela. In contrast, Ginny comes off as superstitious, dumb, and weak. The only thing that really led to her survival was Paul, and for some reason believing in Jason despite the complete lack of evidence. It is not like she deduced through detective work or anything, she just for some reason believed in the legend of Jason and happened to be right. Alice survived by fighting and standing up to her fear. On the other hand, Ginny survived because Paul kept fighting Jason and saving them both. The only time she could have done any damage, she did the exact opposite of what any sane human being would do. I found myself screaming at the screen to put down the chair and hack Jason up with that fucking chainsaw. She came off as stupid and if anything held Paul back, and was the reason he may or may not have died. Really, the only smart thing she did was put on the sweater and pretend to be Pamela, but when you really think about it logically, like how did she know to do that? Because she heard the legend and saw Pamela's decapitated fucking head? For all she knew, Jason wasn't full retard and could have just killed her right there. For these reasons, she didn't resonate with me the same way Alice did. In the way of Jason, you gotta appreciate his killing rampage. It was cool and really set the stage for the killings we'd see in future installments. However, again, the movie plays the identity of the killer as a secret, but overly alludes to the fact fact that it was Jason. I mean, the only other real possibility is Ralph the Crazy Man again, but the audience sees him getting killed pretty early on. However, the movie didn't try to hide the identity of the killer as much as the first, and watching it in 2017 it is pretty obvious, just because of Jason's status in pop culture, so it doesn't detract from the film all that much. One thing the movie doesn't explain is how Jason is a full-grown adult now. He pulls Alice into the lake in the first film and is like 10. However, the first movie's killing happened 22 years after his death as a boy, putting him at 33 years old in that film, or 38 in this film, which would be pretty close to accurate with this film. So you would think that Alice was just dreaming or something, and that's what would make the most sense in the context of the movie, rather than having him grow up like 20 plus years in the span of 5 years after not aging for more than 2 decades, but I was curious on what really happened, so I looked it up. According to Friday the 13th's Wikipedia page, it was a nightmare, but Jason was alive anyways? So that solves that, but then brings up a massive set of questions to the viewer. A. Why, if Jason loved his mom so much, would he hide in the woods for 22 years pretending to be dead? Clearly she loved him back as she went on a mad killing spree. B. I thought Jason couldn't swim, so how did he survive? C. If he did drown, how would the cops never find his body approximately 15 feet off the shore? D. How did a retarded person hide in the woods with no food for like 20 years? E. How did no one ever find his murder shack? F. How did he become an unkillable monster? Was that his autism ability? G. Did he die, come back to life as a zombie, and then become unkillable? There are likely more questions I could ask, and I'm sure a thorough search through the Friday the 13th Wikipedia could answer these questions, but with no wiki or anything, these are questions the movie makes me ask myself. But ultimately, I guess it really doesn't matter, as this is just an exploitive B film. All in all, this film is worth watching. It's fairly short and further sets up the formula that the Jason franchise would continue to follow from here going forward. Is it much different from the first? No. Is it better than the first all in all? No, but I think it's a good expansion and a great tease for what was to come. So with that, tune in and subscribe to see my review of Friday the 13th Part 3 coming very soon.